watch this.
Childcare providers walked off the job today and walked up the Capitol steps to rally for federal funding that might be getting run out of town. You know, we're starting to see the light at the end of the legislative tunnel. So what do those elected leaders see about how we got here and how we get to the end of the session? Education funding seems to be driving this train. Private militias could soon be a thing in Idaho. It's a bill that's halfway through the State House, but one lawmaker believes it should stop right there. Follow the money. It's a phrase that became part of pop culture thanks to the political drama All the President's Men. Well, since then, it's kind of gone hand in hand with government and politics when one wants to learn about the priorities and influences of either one of those. Just last week, Idaho childcare workers learned about where they stand in the priority pecking order. That's when the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee, whose job it is to decide the state's budgets and agency budgets, they wiped $36 million in childcare grants from those budgets. That money came from the federal government, part of the stabilization funding available through the COVID pandemic to help businesses impacted, to stabilize them, to help them stay in business. These are called the ARPA funds, and childcare businesses in Idaho knew that money was not going to last forever, but they were hoping for at least a few more months. The nonprofit Idaho Education for Young Children says JFAC is prematurely cutting those funds, and there's a lot going on with childcare in Idaho lately. So the executive director of IEYC, Beth Oppenheimer, helped us follow the money. During COVID, the American Rescue Plan Act pumped $100 million into Idaho's childcare industry to help keep businesses afloat. So let's look at three separate ARPA funding sources represented by these three separate sacks of cash. The first is a $43 million supplement that is supposed to help childcare businesses from the 1st of March to the end of June. The second is a $36 million health and welfare grant to extend that assistance until the end of September. However, last month, JFAC removed that $36 million extension from the budget, therefore denying the funds. But what about Bag 1, the $43 million supplemental funds to get to the end of June? JFAC has not discussed nor decided if they will approve it, more than a week after it was supposed to start. Then there's Bag 3. They call them community grants, but it's also ARPA cash, funneled through health and welfare to fund after-school programs for kids. The Idaho State Attorney General's office announced this week they are conducting an investigation into how that money was spent. While they all came from the same source, this third bag is not connected to the two supplemental funds. Neither of those two have anything to do with the AG's investigation. Yet, as of today, JFAC has either pulled or postponed grants to assist childcare in Idaho. Hopefully that helps you understand it, but you can see how this would impact a business plan. You get told money will be available to a certain date, and you set your operating budget accordingly. The unexpected cutoff has created an immediate impact on Idaho's vital childcare industry, and those costs often fall right back on their clients, working parents.
If you listen closely for the sound of playing children, you won't today at Lakewood Montessori, because you'd be lending an ear to the wrong place.
There are some political things at work that should not be affecting childcare.
Outside the State House, that's where you'll find the kids, the parents, and the daycare staff, demanding to be heard by the budget writing powers that be inside.
Yep.
And Allison Kelsey,
I have one 2-year-old in daycare.
She's part of the collective voice.
Sending kids to daycare is a tough choice, but it's also an investment. I'm employed full-time. My husband is working to build his business, and really we had childcare in place to support him building that business.
The state backed up these investments with federal ARPA dollars. It was to stabilize Idaho's childcare industry through COVID.
Our center alone lost hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of that time. The stabilization grants have been vital for us.
But in an instant, Mary Clemens says it's over.
This has happened. I have received a letter from Health and Welfare stating that funding is cut immediately.
The industry banked on that funding at least until the end of June.
Instead, they just pulled the rug out from under us.
It's the same rug where these Idahoans found their footing.
It will be a hardship. Somebody's going to pay the price somewhere. Where will it land?
Extremely detrimental to our community.
Remember Allison?
Directly impacted by this, our family has received notice of an immediate tuition increase.
A $240 hike for a $900 monthly bill just for daycare.
Then our little boy only goes 2 days a week.
Daycare was supposed to be an investment for Allison's family and their future.
And that's something we'll probably have to put on hold because it's just more than we can afford.
And now it feels like no one's listening.
It's time to make some serious investment and serious change for the long term.
The parents at this rally were very upset that they're not prioritized by dollars that ideally exist to help them. A big reason why this is such an issue is because these businesses plan their budgets based on those dollars. When it's taken away unexpectedly, well, it then impacts that budget. They got to make it up somewhere. And they're even more upset that many people are not aware of this issue. And from what we learned today with some State House leadership, they're right.
Go ahead. I'm not aware of Chief.
Well, I'm obviously deeply disappointed.
So you can see Speaker Moyle and Senate Pro Tem Winder having an aside right there. Moyle went on to say that this is not on his radar. When they were asked that question, Brian, they deferred it over to Democrat leadership. So to be fair, they're not on JFAC. That's not their direct job. But these are leaders at the State House saying that I'm not exactly fully aware of it. I saw the rally outside, not exactly sure what's going on for my lane directly, but they're right. There are people that are not aware of this.
Well, hopefully they'd want to learn more about it, especially, I mean, $240 a month, that bump right there immediately to healthcare, or excuse me, to child care costs, that's a huge impact for them.
$900 a month for 2 days a week. I'm not a financial expert. Seems like a lot of money to me. And when we talked with Mary, who runs that Montessori herself, like they don't want to hike up prices on parents, but she says, ideally, we have to. We have a budget, and we need to make it work somehow.
So there's still a chance, though, that $43 million could be approved, or at least, I guess, supplemented. Right?
JFAC would have until the end of the legislative session to make that decision. It sounds like that money was supposed to start in March 1st, however. So it's a decision hasn't been made, so it's essentially delayed. So up to date, the money's been held.
So if they make a decision, at least it will last till June, but past that, that money's gone away.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much, Andrew. All right, the game clock is winding down on this year's legislative session. With about 2 weeks left, you could say we're about halfway through the fourth quarter. Seems like a good time to call a timeout, right? Gather the team, figure out how to finish this out. Legislative leaders took time to do that today, but with reporters in the huddle asking questions about the game plan, like if they've stuck to it or if we can expect some sort of razzle-dazzle here at the end. So that's where Joe Paris, chief reporter, political reporter, Joe Paris joining me to kind of figure out if the goal for getting out of the State House on time, is this something that's realistic, Joe?
All right, Brian, so the goal is to be done on March 24th, and that is 2 weeks from Friday, so we'll wait and see. But there's two education issues being debated that are really some of the focal point. What to do about the proposal to send grant money to Idaho students to pursue workforce development careers, and the second, what to do about ESAs, educational savings accounts. You may remember a major ESA pitch was voted down recently in the Idaho Senate. But let's go back. We'll start with Idaho Launch, and that's the idea from Governor Little's office to send eligible Idaho high school students $8,500 grants to help them pursue in-demand careers after high school graduation or for those who have a GED. So the goal is to fill areas of Idaho's job force that really are needed by helping students cover the cost of learning those fields. Now, critics of the plan have pushed on the cost of the program and if it will really even help the job force problems in Idaho. And while it is possible that the bill, House Bill 24, is amended and voted on by lawmakers, there's now another factor in play, a trailer bill to Idaho Launch that aims to fix problems that critics see with $8,500 grants. So bill sponsors of the trailer say that it makes three big changes to Idaho Launch. It enhances legislative oversight of the program. It ensures greater skin in the game from participants by capping the maximum amount of funds that families would be able to get through the program. And it also limits the use of Idaho Launch funds to just tuition and fees. The cost of the program is also cut down from $60 to $7 million from the previous price tag out of $100 million. Senate Pro Tem Chuck Winder detailed the likelihood of Idaho Launch at this point. Meanwhile, Minority Leader Alana Rubel for the Idaho Democrats expressed worries about rushing into something new at this point.
I think the trailer bill kind of outlines most of the concerns that were voiced by a majority of the Senate members. There are probably some that just won't support it at all, no matter what you do to it. But that was the effort to try and get enough votes to move it forward. Because I think there's a good consensus that we need workforce development. We're just not sure the way 24 was written was the way to do it.
I'm a supporter of Launch. I would like to see that move forward. It's and we're getting at a point in session where it's going to be really hard to cobble together something coherent other than Launch, frankly.
So we'll have to wait and see if a deal is made on the big idea. And the other big idea in play that we've talked a lot about here on the 208, ESAs. Long story short, a proposal by Republican lawmakers would allow public tax dollars to follow students into private school, religious school, or homeschool. A portion of money would go to a family in a savings account, and another portion of that money would go to public schools. Now, the idea being that money should follow students to help them learn, rather than just having it go to a public school where a student might not do as well as other environments, according to proponents. So, is the topic dead after it was voted down in the Idaho Senate? Well, Republican leaders shared their behind-the-scenes State House insight. House Speaker Mike Moyle says he believes there's appetite for ESAs in the House. Dems, meanwhile, maintain that ESA should not be the idea Idaho lawmakers run with. They argue public schools need a boost, not a demotion.
I think there's a lot of support on the House side to do something on the ESA, but I don't see them interconnected with the K-12 budget. I know that some are concerned about that, but I don't see that. At least I haven't seen that way, that anything to make me think that's happening now. So I think that you'll see like a lot more movement like you saw in the Senate with the introduction of another bill this week on that issue. I think that the House committee's talking about introducing Representative Cloud's bill. They may have done it today. I know they were talking about doing something. So you're seeing the issues move around the edges, but you haven't got it to where it's all, full steam ahead. And what that ends up being, I just don't know, because you're not seeing everybody coming together yet on that issue. There's still discrepancies between the two groups.
I don't think that we need to start throwing public dollars at private schools in order to claim that we are pro-school choice. We have that. But I do believe it's really important. I've always said I'm too conservative to support vouchers because I believe that there should be serious accountability that comes with the spending of public dollars.
So two of the biggest topics lawmakers wanted to tackle are not done right now, but they still have a chance. And, Brian, it's interesting because there's a situation here where lawmakers don't get either done because, by law, they don't have to get, things other than the budget and rule review done. And with really the situation with what Speaker Moyle has put out saying we want to go home by the 24th, it puts pressure on lawmakers to start getting things done. Because, again, if they get done with all the budget appropriations and they get done with the rule review and there's other things out there that haven't gotten done, they may have to wait till next year.
That's true. Well, this is how it works. You set up a bill, you pass a bill, and if it requires funding, well, you got to account for that in the budgets with JFAC. And so then this is kind of like the dry portion, but it can also be the very important portion of the legislative session. The last couple of years, they made a few headlines when it comes to funding and not funding certain things.
Right, and like with Andrew's story that we just talked about, everything that set up the problem that the childcare people are talking about is based on budgets from a few years ago and based on the allocation. So some of the budget stuff we talk about now may be boring. It sets up major issues in the future.
A couple weeks ago. All right, thanks, Joe. As of yesterday, well, as of today, Senate Bill 1056 is sitting in the House Transportation and Defense Committee. Having already passed the Senate 24-9, it's just waiting for a public hearing on the House side. This is the bill that would make it okay for private militias to form in Idaho, something that has been illegal since 1927. The bill's sponsor, Republican Senator Dan Foreman from Moscow, says the current law is outdated and it goes against First Amendment rights, the one that guarantees a right to assemble. Also yesterday, we got an email from Bill in Buell addressed to us, the email was, here at the 208, but it wasn't really meant for us. He wrote, "Dear Senators, I have to wonder, as I do with most things, about the unintended consequences. What will the state of Idaho do if, because of this bill sanctioning armed militias, what will happen when they start setting up roadblocks and extolling monies for Idahoans to pass, or even force people they don't like from their cars and shoot them? They don't just own these guns for show. They want to shoot somebody and are truly just waiting for the excuse. I urge you to think seriously about this bill." And I'm guessing he's appealing to lawmakers in the House chamber since, again, it's already gone through the Senate. And maybe his train of thought just went a little off the rails there, since we have laws in place to prevent roadblocks on public property, against extortion, and of course against shooting people just because you don't like them. And that's a big leap to say they want to shoot someone and are just waiting for the excuse. But we get the point, Bill. This opens up the door for many possibilities, which was the biggest issue for one of the bill's outspoken opponents. Democratic Senator Assistant Minority Leader James Ruchte is a fifth-generation Idahoan. And he told us today he remembers when the Aryan nations parading through Coeur d'Alene was what got Idaho annual media attention. And it was something he would hear about even while serving overseas. Repealing this law, he says, allowing for such groups to gather, but this time with guns, is his biggest issue with this bill.
My biggest issue with this bill is we had a prohibition against private militias, and we've now removed that. We had a prohibition against allowing people to march under arms in people's cities, and we've now removed that. So we've opened it up for people to do those things.
People already show up with guns, in costume, not necessarily parading, but they're there.
And now we have the government saying, sounds like a good idea. I'm just telling you, mixing First Amendment rights with weapons is not a good idea. It's never been a good idea. And I can guarantee you these groups know that. They know what's going on with this bill, and they're going to use that. They're going to use that to say, you can't stop me. Yes, I've got my weapon. Yes, I'm using my First Amendment rights here. Yes, I'm getting out of hand. Yes, I'm yelling, I'm screaming, I'm antagonizing people. But I've got my weapon with me too. We're creating a disaster.
This bill was stopped last year. So a bill similar to this. What's the difference this year?
I'm not sure what the difference is because this bill was just as bad last year as it is this year.
And your worry, if this goes through and gets signed by the governor, what is your worry?
My biggest worry is it's a nod to groups, to extremist groups, to white supremacist groups, white nationalists, to the Proud Boys, to Aryan nations, and to others, that their behavior, their attitudes are welcome in Idaho, that you can put them on full display.
Okay, so as for last year's bill, that was House Bill 475, it would have just repealed the old law entirely. It did pass the House 57-13 last session, but got stuck in the Senate State Affairs Committee. This year's version is a repeal and a replace kind of thing. It removes the ban on militias, but keeps the part about cities supporting or outfitting said militia. And this session, it has already cleared last session's roadblock, which would be the Senate. Senator Ruchte said he has not spoken with any law enforcement specifically about this bill, but he is sure if any were in favor of it, they likely would have shown up to say so. He said he's fine if there was a bill to remove the outdated sections of the current law, but he believes we should keep the policy in place of we're not okay with private militias forming and parading in Idaho. We tried several times to ask Senator Dan Foreman about his bill. After all, he's the sponsor, but our emails went unanswered, and he wasn't in his office today when we stopped by. No word on when or if Senate Bill 1056 will be heard on the House side. All right, today, March 8th, International Women's Day, and we have many prominent women to celebrate in Idaho's history, from Peg Leg Annie to Barbara Morgan to Cherie Buckner Webb to Kristen Armstrong, just to name a few. But today, we're talking about a woman who is very important to this TV station right here, KTVB. Georgia Davidson was, in fact, the first person to bring a TV station to Boise.
Davidson started broadcasting to Idahoans on KIDO radio, then the only radio station on the air in Boise. At that time, there was a government freeze on television stations because they weren't considered necessary during a wartime economy. But in 1952, when the freeze was lifted, Davidson sent an application for KIDO television to the FCC, and it was approved in December of that year. She had enough vision of the future to understand it was a gamble worth taking, and on July 12th, she flipped the switch that put KIDO TV on the air.
And now, that original station, which is known as KTVB, happens after the sale of KIDO AM in 1959. We're going to be 70 years old coming up. That's this July, July 12th. And some fast facts about Davidson. She was born in Notice in 1907. For many years, was the only woman who owned one of the 120 NBC-affiliated stations across the country. And she'd be the only woman in NBC meetings with 120 other men, so imagine that. She was truly a trailblazer. Georgia Davidson died in 1997 at the age of 89. So with her, we are wishing you all happy International Women's Day. Oh, welcome back. All right, let's get to your comments. Got about a minute and a half to go here on this Wednesday show. A lot of people talking about the possible opening up of militias here in Idaho. Senator Ruchti's concern is pretty shallow. If and when the Second Amendment people in Idaho behave like Antifa does in Portland or Seattle, then it may be a relevant argument, says Frank in Eagle. Although that was a threat, never happened, hasn't happened here in Idaho. Can you imagine being a law enforcement officer charged with crowd control with one or more armed militias parading? This bill is a disaster in the making, says Jack in Boise. Actually, the standard ground law would allow shooting someone you don't like for being threatening, says Chuck Wilson. I don't know if it's just because you don't like them, but that makes an excellent point. The standard ground law is out there. Explain the difference between private militias and street gangs, both armed, both with intent to intimidate, PJ Smith in Nampa asks. Well, I guess the difference here would be is if this bill goes through and becomes law, then one would be legal, the other would still be illegal. That's in its simplest form. So Idaho is pro-birth, but not pro-life. Let's give rich people money to send their kid to private school, but nothing for working parents to help pay for daycare. Disgusting family values they are showing, says JoJo in Boise. So GOP leadership is unaware of the funding issue with childcare and turned to Democrats for help. Yet JFAC booted all but one Democrat off that committee. Jack in Boise says, well, not quite. It was 4, now it's down to 3. So not quite that low, but still, they kicked one of the Democrats off there. Didn't the legislature say they'd support women and children after they approved the abortion ban? Cutting childcare funding is definitely not supporting women and children, says Sheila. We'll see you tomorrow.